Hello everyone and welcome to Career Launcher. So in today's class, we are going to discuss about SHANTI Act 2025. Now you will be thinking that sir, this was actually in 2025. So why we are discussing in the month of August 2026? So the reason is this has been in the news because it has been challenged in the Supreme Court, and recently the Supreme Court has asked some question with regards to SHANTI Act. Not only that, it has been in the news in the last few months, and actually a lot of editorials also came with regards to this SHANTI Act, and that's why it becomes very, very important even for this year, that is for 2026. So can SHANTI Act deter courts from fixing suitable compensation for nuclear disaster? Supreme Court asks. Now, why we are talking about it? So before starting it, I would say, before starting the concept of what is SHANTI Act, this is actually related with nuclear energy. Okay. So before starting the concept of what exactly is SHANTI Act, why there is a criticism and what are the positives of it, let us talk about the energy supply in India. So in India, the electricity, most of the electricity actually comes from coal-based thermal power plant, almost around 60-70%, which is actually a non-renewable source of energy or conventional source of energy. So it is still, we are very much dependent on non-renewable source of energy. There are some other renewable source of energy, 14%, hydropower 8%, nuclear energy is one of the best source of, it is also part of renewable energy, no doubt. So the idea is we are producing very less amount of electricity from nuclear energy. And our plan is that increase this. We have a huge potential if we increase this, because nuclear energy is considered as actually a part of, it is considered as a part of renewable energy, and of course they are very clean. So still we are very much dependent on non-renewable source of energy for our electricity needs. And you know, whenever we talk about nuclear technology, I'm sure you must have heard this term. Nuclear technology is considered as dual use. Dual use means it can be used for both purposes, for making nuclear bomb and for nuclear energy. Right now, India is concerned about making nuclear energy, and that's why we are having almost 24 nuclear reactors for this. Okay, so you can see it here. We have a target that by 2047, 100 gigawatt of electricity should be generated from nuclear power plant or nuclear power. That is the idea behind this. So to increase this, right now we are actually very less. So current capacity is somewhere around 8 to 9 gigawatt. If we have to increase it by 2047, 100 gigawatt, we have to open the sector more. Open and expand the sector. That's the idea. Okay. Now keep these things in the mind, and you have to watch the entire class. Then only you will understand the concept behind it. And second thing, you should know that we have a net zero emission target of 2070. This also we have discussed in the paid classes in detail. What is the meaning of net zero emission, etc. and all. So to ensure net zero emission, we have to move towards a renewable source of energy. And one of the best source of renewable source, one of the best source is actually nuclear energy, you know it. So first, our target is to have more and more nuclear energy generation, because it is a renewable source of energy and it will help us achieve many various targets like 100 gigawatt by 2047 and of course net zero emission by 2070. So this 100 gigawatt target is for nuclear energy generation, which is considered as a clean source of energy. Now, to facilitate this, actually there should be more increase in percentage of nuclear energy contribution or electricity contribution from nuclear source. This law was passed, sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India Bill 2025. So this in short is actually called as SHANTI Bill. It was passed in 2025 from Lok Sabha as well as from Rajya Sabha, and you can see it here, and then it became an act. So now we are calling it as SHANTI Act 2025. Okay, now we are talking about SHANTI Act 2025. However, it has been not properly implemented, because nowadays in 2026 we are coming up with a lot of SHANTI rules. To implement that, the government is coming up with a lot of SHANTI rules. It talks about private participation also. This is the key. This is the most important thing we will be talking about. That till now, I'm sure you must be aware, under Prime Minister's office, we had discussed that there are two famous offices, two famous department of Atomic Energy and Department of Space. for many years since 1947 till almost recent years, both actually the sector, that is atomic sector and space sector, where only government companies can actually play the role. But since 2020s, we have seen actually in the space sector, private participation are also increasing. So not only ISRO, but other agencies are also coming. Right now, you must have seen in the news with regards to the Skyroot Aerospace and all many other news and things regarding that. Now, even the atomic sector, actually now the government under this Shanti bill, or what we call it as Shanti Act, is allowing some limited participation of private companies. We are using this word limited means it is not completely open, but yes, we are now allowing gradually private companies to come and venture into the field of atomic energy. Okay, I have one request. Please write in the comment section who is considered as father of India's space program. You have to write in the comments. And who is considered as father of India's, you can say atomic program or nuclear program. Atomic or nuclear program. You have to write in the comments. Okay, ये दोनों आप लिखिए. ठीक है, अब देखो. So we're talking about this. Next is nuclear liability is a major controversy. So basically there was an earlier law, Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010. Okay, this actually law has been this law has been changed now, because now we are having Shanti Act. Which actually, so the new law has actually changed the provision of the previous law. And now as far as liability, nuclear liability damage is concerned, this has been reduced, or this has been, I would say, removed. What is this? We will discuss in today's class in detail. So keep this in mind, because this is very important. We will discuss in detail. Okay, next thing is, of course, the petition has been filed in the Supreme Court in this regard and the matter is pending. We will discuss about that also. And of course, I've told you that these all things are being done so that we can achieve this target of 100 gigawatt by 2047. Okay. So let us talk. We are having 24 nuclear reactors across 7 locations. They are generating almost 8.78 gigawatt. Right now, means almost, and this is the news of December 2025. So it is generating 8.78 gigawatt electricity, and we have target is by 2047, solar energy should be nuclear energy should be generating 100 gigawatts. Means almost we have to do at least 10 times or even more than 10 times, from here to here in the next upcoming 22 years. So these are prominent nuclear power plants, and I'm sure you must be aware. Narora is in UP, Rawat Bhata is in Rajasthan, Kakrapar is in Gujarat, Tarapur is in Maharashtra, Kaiga very famous in Karnataka, Kodankulam is in Tamil Nadu, Kalpakkam is actually in Tamil Nadu. Kalpakkam has been in the very much in the news, and Kodankulam we have made with the help of Russia. These things. Okay, so this is the bill. The bill consolidates and modernizes India's nuclear framework. So the main thing is it enables limited private participation. Means this bill is allowing private companies to venture in the field of nuclear technology. When you are allowing private company, we are actually allowing also foreign company also. We'll talk about it. The bill actually comes up with Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, which will regulate all the things in case any to ensure the safety. That's the idea behind this. To ensure that safety is in the atomic nuclear reactor. To ensure that there should not be any such things. And these are things you should know. Now, nuclear energy, everyone knows. Basically, in nuclear reactor, we perform nuclear fission, and because of which huge amount of heat is generated from there, actually electricity is generated, etc. So the idea is that this generates electricity without producing greenhouse gas, and that is why it is called as clean source of energy generally. And it is also considered as renewable source. The nuclear energy is considered as the clean source. Now, let us move on to the evolution of nuclear laws. In the past also we have seen these laws like Atomic Energy Act 1962. Amendments were done in these laws in 1986, 87, 2015, etc. Civil Liability of Nuclear Damage Act 2010. So civil liability means if nuclear damage or accident happened, who is responsible for it? So for that, compensation would be there in case of nuclear incident. These things were actually built. Then in budget 2025-2026, the government talked about allocating 20,000 crore for deployment of small nuclear modular reactors. At least 5 indigenously, means made in India. designed small modular reactor to be operated by 2033. Initiatives by Bhabha Atomic Research Center, you know. These are the initiatives. Now, the major Shanti bill talks about the first thing is private sector participation, modernizing licensing and safety framework. Modernizing licensing means you are easing the private companies' participation so that there can be a more and more investment. That's the idea, to increase investment in nuclear sector. Because once we increase investment in nuclear sector, then only we can expect actually, once we actually ease the laws with regards to private sector participation, then only we can expect investment and further rise in nuclear energy generation, etc. And a regulation of nuclear radiation to boost to research, innovation, nuclear liability and compensation, dispute redressal. So this too is actually the main key. First is private sector participation. Another is about liability or the damage. This has been very much in the news with regards to it, which we will talk. Now, so Shanti, which stands for Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. It was passed last year in December. And it replaces two laws, old laws, Atomic Energy Act 1962 and Civil Liability of Nuclear Damage Act 2010. This law allows private sector's participation to a limited, it is not that the entire nuclear reactor will be given to private companies. It is not like that, but yes, some sort of private participation will be there. And so for that, rules with regards to compensation of an accident, etc. has been changed. Now, all this is because we need this target to be achieved. So private companies can participate in some peripheral areas. So basically, the idea is basically even in earlier cases, in some cases they were allowed, but now primarily we are actually opening it, the private sector's participation. Although still the overall nuclear reactor will be governed by the government only. Now the target is, it says that we need this target. So for that we have this, we need huge amount of money, technology, manpower, manufacturing, modular reactors, etc. to achieve this target. Right now we are almost nearly around 9 gigawatt. We have just discussed it is 8.78 gigawatt. So of course we are far away from the target. So earlier the case was the government used to build the nuclear power plant and generated electricity. And God forbid, if the nuclear accident happened, the government is supposed to pay the nuclear compensation, etc. and all. Now you are allowing private companies also in a joint venture. It is not that we are completely actually privatizing the entire sector, but yes, we are actually allowing the private sector to send us the input, raw materials, etc. So overall, the handling actually of the nuclear reactor is with the government. However, the private companies can provide us something. And can get access to power generation side, etc. No need to go in detail. So certain sensitive sectors will remain under the hand of the main things will remain in the hand of the central government. For example, high radioactive waste recycling, spent fuel recycling, heavy water production, etc. and all. No need to go in detail. Just have a rough idea about it. So basically, the private sector participation will be there, but of course the government will do regulation. For example, in this law, the government has said this body, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, will be set up. It's a statutory body which will ensure that everything should be there. It is a regulatory body to ensure safety of nuclear reactors, and nothing of such sort of incident or nothing such accident should happen. Now the main problem is nuclear liability. You know what is liability? Here liability means if God forbid the accident happens, then who will pay the compensation? Because earlier, if it is controlled 100% by the government, then of course it is the responsibility of the government to pay the compensation. Generally, the accident chances are very less because there are so many safety measures. But of course, there is chance, in 1% chance. If the nuclear damage, if the accident happens, the cost is very huge. Unit we have seen in the Fukushima nuclear disaster, Chernobyl disaster reaction, Chernobyl nuclear disaster, etc. If there is a nuclear accident, who will pay death, injury, loss of property? Who will pay the compensation? The government, company, the government, equipment, taxpayer, or etc. If nobody is paying, it means it is the taxpayer who is paying. Yes? Basically, no, I'll tell you why. What is the thing? So basically, the old law, it talks about civil nuclear. This was the law that has been replaced by SHANTI Act. Nuclear operator could seek a right of recourse against the supplier of equipment material if the accident resulted from defective equipment or certain. For example, this is a nuclear reactor. Please understand one thing. Nuclear reactor. Of course, it is being controlled by the government. So the previous law said that if we allow private companies to send their nuclear supplier, let's say any nuclear implement. For example, they are sending some machines, some small machine. I'm just giving example. Some inputs like raw material, uranium, etc. Anything. This is coming from private companies. And if the disaster happens here, and it was found, when the inquiry was conducted, it was found that the disaster happened because of the nuclear supply. There was defective nuclear supply. Means the private company which had provided this equipment, whatever is the equipment or the input or whatever it was defective. In that case, this private company was supposed to pay the damage, or the liability was up to this. But this was not liked by Western countries, especially America and all. They had pressurized that you should not talk about this. And otherwise, because otherwise the private company will be fearful in actually giving these things. But both has a flip side. The other side is, if you remove this provision, the private companies from India and the world, they might not send good quality content, good quality raw materials, or good quality inputs, because they believe that if something goes wrong, we are not responsible. Okay, so the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act talked about right of recourse. This is the keyword. Against the supplier of equipment. If the accident happens and it is found that because of your supply, there was a defective supply, then in that case, the private company who was supplying this will be held liable and they have to pay the damage. The operator, the nuclear operator, the company which is operating the nuclear reactor, can seek damage from the supplier or compensation. That was the old law. The new law says they have come up with graded liability framework. So basically the idea is, if I show it, that gives right to recover some of the compensation. Now, this law, the new bill, which now has become an act, we are talking about this SHANTI Act. Now it has become an act. Removes the right to recourse on the ground of supply of defective equipments or materials. So if there is a nuclear reactor and some private sector had provided some defective equipments to the company, and in that case, if the accident happens, God forbid, then in that case, this private sector company has no liability now, or very less liability. The right of recourse has been removed in case of ground of defective supply of defective equipments. So in that case, the private sector will be willing to participate more. This will improve actually foreign investment. The foreign companies will invest. Yes, it is true that because they believe that, okay, we are not responsible. This will push the investors, the foreign investors, to come and invest in India. Yes, that is the positive aspect of it. And this has been being demanded by US and many other countries, that you should remove this liability provision. But the flip side is, if accident happens, then this private sector, even if the accident happened because of defective equipment, they are not responsible. So of course the compensation will be given from the government funds. That is from the taxpayers' money. Second thing is, if the private sector is not liable, in that case, the private sector may give deliberately poor quality products, because they believe that if accident happen, we are not responsible. So they will not be careful. The other aspect is that, but still we have AERB, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. So they keep on regulating it. If the private sector will give us defective equipment, the AERB is supposed to check it. So there are multiple arguments, but bottom line is actually that will happen, that of course the private sector will not have much tension in this regard. Okay, that is the main thing that is being criticized by those who are opposing it. Now, that is the case if you are reducing financial liability of nuclear operators, you are actually transferring it to the public. And that is the idea behind this. So, of course, whenever a private company is selling it, it is company doing it for its own profit. That's the idea behind this, these things. Yes, there is, if you allow the private companies that there is no liability or very less liability, in that case, they will not ensure that the component is absolutely safe, because they believe that we are not responsible if anything goes wrong. Okay, so these are actually the debates with regards to it. The one argument is it will promote for investment. But the other argument is if something goes wrong, what will happen then? And these are the. Now we are talking about private companies are profit making. So these are actually, this is the valid, this is the very famous argument that if you allow private companies, of course, they will only talk about profit making. But the government companies were supposed to actually be for the long term, for the benefit of common people at large. That's the idea behind this. Now, another concern is AERB has been established, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, but is it completely independent? This also we will talk, because this Atomic Energy Regulatory Board will be selected by the members from Atomic Energy Commission. And Atomic Energy Commission is under the government of India, of course, under Prime Minister, of course. So many people are saying actually that with when Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, which is being set up to ensure the safety of nuclear reactors, will this be completely independent? So these were some of the things that were raised. Okay, so that's one thing. Next is, of course, we have discussed about it. In short, we have discussed. This is the main argument. The government's position is more private investment will happen, more nuclear plants, more electricity, less dependent on fossil fuels, and 100 gigawatt target will be achieved by 2047 when we are coming up with this new Shanti Act. However, the flip side is when you are allowing more private participation, they are only concerned about profit. If the nuclear, God forbid, if the disaster happen, who will be responsible? If the private company is not going to pay the taxes, the compensation, then it is the taxpayers' money which will be used. The government money means taxpayers' money, which will be used for compensation, etc. So the Shanti Act is already the law, but its detailed implementation is being implemented. You know these things, so you can read about it. So the first thing is it allows private sectors. We have discussed. Second, it indemnifies a nuclear supplier by channeling liability for any accident to the operator. It omits the right of recourse. So the operator will be responsible. Operator of the nuclear reactor. If the supplier is giving some damaging equipment, and if the God forbid the accident happens, the operator will be responsible and not the nuclear supplier, which might be a private company, because suppliers can be a private company, in this case. The operator's liability is capped between 100 crore for small plants and 3,000 crore for largest plant. And these are the things being talked about. And we have discussed about Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. Some of the people are saying that perhaps it might not be completely independent. So these are the things being talked about. This is first. This is second. We are not talking about the numbers. That 300 SDR, which is equivalent to 3,900 crore. So there actually one criticism is the liability still is very less amount. That is what you should know. The total liability of an accident will be somewhere around 300 million SDR. SDR is actually used in the context of IMF, which is 3,900 crore. So they are saying that even if there is actually in some case, even when the damage will happen and the operator right of recourse for the suppliers has been removed, the operators will have to pay the operator's liability. The operator who is operating the nuclear power plant, their liability is hardly 100 crore for a small power plant and 3,000 crore for largest plant. And even these are actually very less. That is what people have said. And the reason actually is we have seen a lot of nuclear disaster, for example, Fukushima in 2011. Okay. The Japanese Center for Economic Research had estimated that the Fukushima accident, which happened in 2011, the cost was 80 trillion yen or 46 lakh crore in rupees term, 46 lakh crore. And here the maximum actually is 100 crore for small plant and 3,000 crore for largest plant. And that is operator's liability, not the suppliers. We have told you suppliers do not have any liability now. So people are saying that this is very less. Okay. As compared to this, for example, we have seen this Fukushima nuclear disaster happening. We have seen Chernobyl disaster. So Chernobyl disaster happened in 1980s and the cost was around 21 lakh crore. Okay, so the disaster, they are saying it that the disaster, if God forbid happens, the impact is very massive. That's the idea behind this. Okay, so it's about authority. Now the court has said, the petitions have been filed, that now can Shanti Act deter courts from fixing suitable compensation? Deter means it does not allow the court for fixing suitable compensation for nuclear disaster. Supreme Court asked this. Now the matter is pending. Against a lawful legal tort. The court also made oral remark while issuing notice to the union government and AERB. In a petition filed, the petition have been filed by retired senior officers and scientists. to challenge the Shanti Act, which limit the liability of operators of nuclear demonstration, suppliers and manufacturers. Suppliers, they do not have any liability. For operators, there is a liability, but of course it is limited. है ना? Operators के लिए. That the resolvable liability is 300 million SDR, which is a very small number. Cannot recover even a small fraction of their actual loss. है ना? So we have discussed here also. देखो यहाँ पे मैंने किया था कि it allows private sectors. Second, it removes right of recourse that allowed operators to sue, to file a case against suppliers if suppliers has given damaged equipments, which can be private companies nowadays, है ना? And the third is actually the operator's liability is also the operator who is operating the nuclear power plant. Their liability is 100 crore for a small plant and 3,000 crore for largest plant, which is very small. No need to remember the numbers, but you should know that according to the critics, it is a very small amount, the liability. Okay, these are the things being talked about. Okay. The senior lawyer pointed out that Chernobyl disaster, we had seen this much amount of loss, huge amount. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant happened in 2011. Chernobyl happened somewhere in 1980s, as far as I remember, 84. Modern date is in Ukraine, but at that time it was a part of Soviet Union. Read about this, Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So these are some of the things that were actually being raised concern about it. Now let us wait for it. Please read something about it. First, Chernobyl disaster. Second, Fukushima reactor. Another one actually was Bhopal gas tragedy. Please read about it. It also happened in 1980s, as far as I remember. Chernobyl, you should check the year. And write in the comments, we celebrate or observe National Pollution Control Day to remember Bhopal gas tragedy. On which date? Answer it in the comment section. So this is all about today's class. Please subscribe to our channel, press the like button, share this video. Thank you everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.